Hey everyone. Before we dive into this final episode of season 3 of The Wheelchair Activist, I want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for listening and for joining me on this journey. Whether you've been listening from the first episode, joined partway in between, or this is your first episode, I want to say that it means so much to me to have you here. This season has been my absolute favorite to make because I've had the privilege of talking to so many amazing disabled people who are making change and showing the world what resilience looks like, what passion looks like. But I'm actually recording this on a really challenging day. Earlier today, it was confirmed that Donald Trump is being reelected President of the United States. As an American, as much as I try and hide that sometimes, I'm heartbroken by the news. And this isn't about politics before you think it is. It's actually not. It's about people and about the very real impact that his agenda will have on countless lives. I grieve today for the rights of so many people, the hard-won freedoms and the rights that so many before us have fought for. I fear for the harm that will come as a result of his actions. I call myself an activist, right? That's the name of the show. That's my online persona. I'm meant to be helpful, right? I'm meant to look forward to the fight ahead and never ever give up. And don't worry, we won't. But I want to share something, and that's I feel really defeated today, and I know lots of other people will too. And that's okay. It's okay to feel the weight of this disappointment and the hopelessness that I know so many of us are feeling right now. And it's okay to grieve over the setbacks, right? Sometimes activism requires us to mourn for what we've lost. But here's what I want everyone to remember. Even in moments like these, where defeat is so heavy, we're not alone. I believe in our voices. I believe in our stories and our actions and our shared resilience. But we can't do it alone. And even though I feel defeated today, tomorrow is in fact a new day. Scarlett O'Hara was right, guys. It is. And we're all going to continue to fight together. And I want to thank you for being here and joining in that fight with me. So, the last episode of season 3 of The Wheelchair Activist. Welcome to The Wheelchair Activist, a podcast hosted by me, Emma Vogelman, and every month I interview amazing members and allies of the disabled community who are quite literally changing the world. Welcome to not one, but two guests for the final episode of season 3 of The Wheelchair Activist. I couldn't be more excited for this conversation, but let's meet our guest, Rebecca. Can I go to you?
Hello, I'm so excited to be here to meet you and to have this conversation. I feel like when I was first thinking about becoming a parent, and then even when I was pregnant, there were just like no resources, conversations, stories being told about disability and parenting. And so this feels very important to me and exciting to me. I'm really honored to be here. I am a disabled parent. I'm a writer. I was a longtime teacher and have pivoted more towards full-time writing and speaking. My book is Sitting Pretty. And I also have a podcast that is parenting related, Scratch That, Parenting and Reparenting Off Script. So those are some things about me.
Wonderful. And if anyone has not read Rebecca's book, you will find me talking about it all over my social media because it was just the most seen I have ever felt from a piece of writing. And I could talk to Rebecca about it for ages and just tell her how wonderful she is. But we're also joined by the incredibly colorful, sunny, wonderful Sophie. So can I get you to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm so excited to be here as well. Again, like Rebecca said, being a disabled parent is just not talked about. So I think it's so important to discuss it and all the things that come along with it. But yeah, I'm basically a content creator. I work a lot with social media, just sharing my life as a disabled person, as a disabled mother, trying to educate, but also share the other bits that maybe sometimes people think we can't do or don't focus on. And yeah, show the positivity around it as well.
Beautiful. And if you don't follow Sophie on social media, you absolutely should because it is exactly like the frame that we see right now, which is full of color. And I absolutely love your content. Thank you both
Yeah.
so much for joining this conversation. So, yeah, today we're going to be talking about parenthood. And to be really honest with you both, like this is quite out of my comfort zone. It's outside of my own lived experience because I do not have children unless you count my dogs, which I do. But I appreciate that human children might be ever so slightly different. Although if you met my dogs, maybe you'd think otherwise. But can I get you guys to tell us a little bit about your little ones? So, Rebecca.
Yes. My little one is a giant already. He was born in 2020, so he's 4.5, and he was just measuring me. Likes to like see how our heights match up, and he is like almost as tall as me now in my chair. So my mind is blown. Yeah, I have a 4.5-year-old son, and he is larger than life, feels every feeling to 110 degrees and full of imagination and storytelling. I just like feel like bearing witness to his life and his becoming is one of the greatest privileges that I have experienced. He is a wonder to me, and I realize I have every possible bias, but I feel it
Uh-huh.
nonetheless.
Oh, amazing. Can't wait to hear more about him and Sophie.
So I've got a little girl called Zyra who was also born in 2020. So both COVID
Wow.
babies, which is wild. Yeah, she's the same. She is just an absolute joy. She's so fun.
Mm.
She's so full of life. And yeah, she keeps me on my toes. She's very sassy. I'm not going to admit that's come from me at all. But yeah, no, it's great. She's amazing.
So this actually has worked out even more sort of serendipitous than I thought because you both have kids the exact same age. That's
Mhm.
amazing. So as I said, I don't have kids, but I have grown up with the sort of societal expectation of disabled women aren't mothers, or if they are mothers, that they don't have the children themselves necessarily. For like a little background to you guys of how wild it sort of is to me, is that there was, when I was growing up in Chicago, there was a woman with the same condition that I have, SMA, so spinal muscular atrophy, and she was very much advised not to get pregnant, not to have children, and she did it anyways. And yeah, my family was part of sort of the SMA group for, the Chicago area, but this woman was on the news. And it was literally newsworthy back
Mm.
in probably, either the late 90s or the early 2000s when this woman with my condition was having a baby and then she went on to have two babies. So, that's what I grew up with
Mhm.
thinking like it never was something that was going to be in my future, which is really
Mhm.
weird because society tells women that we are for producing children. And we could probably go into the political like side of that for forever, but I always assumed that having a child is not for me, and it's newsworthy.
Mhm.
It's huge. So
Mhm.
I'd love to know, did you guys grow up thinking that you A wanted to have kids and then B that you could?
Mhm.
Sophie.
Yeah, I've got SMA, same as you. And we had like SMA groups here, like you've talked about, and I saw people in those groups that were mums. So I
Mhm.
think that for me was amazing because I saw it right from being a child. I can
Mhm.
remember one lady having her electric wheelchair, and she had a baby seat built into her armrest. So her
Oh,
baby
cool.
on her electric wheelchair. And I will never forget. And I was like, it
Mm.
obviously is possible. But until that point, you kind of like, oh, I don't know. From a medical point of view, they kind of always try to put you off, I think, because it can obviously affect your muscles. It can really change your muscle strength and everything once you've had a child. And obviously it's a huge strain on your body when you're sitting in a wheelchair for 16 hours a day, having something growing in there and not being able to move freely and stretch, obviously is huge on your body. So I think they kind of do it as a kind of safe point of view, but then there's no encouragement whatsoever. It's kind of like, well,
Mm.
you want to do it, you can. And I just wanted to do it. So I thought I'm gonna do it no matter what because I can and I'm gonna
Mm.
fight through
Yeah.
it whether you're telling me to or not. So
I think that that's so interesting because you saw it almost normalized as a young person, but I definitely want to come back to like the pregnancy and like the physical sides of it because, yeah, of course, with SMA, for people that aren't familiar, it's a muscle wasting condition. It comes under the group of muscular dystrophy. So, I mean, I have so many questions, but yeah, Rebecca, for you, what was it like? Did you grow up?
Mm.
Part of me is like, well, I kind of know your answer because, of course, I've read the book. But for our listeners,
Yeah.
how did motherhood feel to you growing up?
Yeah. First, I just want to acknowledge, like, I felt really emotional listening to both of you describe the pictures that you were given in different ways. Like Emma, I'm picturing little you absorbing that news story, right? And like what signals you're getting in your brain and how that shapes what you imagine for your life. And then Sophie, the picture of the electric wheelchair with the baby seat built in. Like these pictures are so powerful, and I think we can minimize how that shapes who we imagine we are and how powerful that is in the lives that we build. So for me, yes, I talk about this a little bit in my book. When I wrote my book, I was not pregnant. I didn't know that that was really a very real possibility for me. When I was very young, I definitely pictured myself as a parent because I had not yet received the signal that I was like categorically something different from the rest of my peers. But as I got older, I started to pick up on like those cues, those keys, which I don't even know if I remember anything as specific as a news story. I think it was sort of like a hundred tiny little interactions with people. I was noticing in the ways that, like relatives would interact with my sisters differently than me around, imagined futures and all the ways we signal that to each other. I definitely grew up in a community in the middle of the US that really, like you said, Emma, really prioritizes like women. The purpose and the great fulfillment of your life will be to find your husband and then have babies. And I'm the youngest of six kids. I have huge extended family, so that is the business that everyone was in around me. And I had all of these pictures of motherhood, but none of them looked anything like me. And so as I got a little bit older, I struggled to imagine that for myself. And I also struggled to decipher what I even wanted. I started to sort of picture other things for my life. And I'm really glad that weirdly, I'm really glad that I was offered that space in a way that a lot of the girls and women around me in my community weren't, which is like, well, what else could I do? What else could I build my life on? And so for most of my 20s, and the great side note to this story is that I got married very young and then divorced very young. So that was a whole little like blip on the screen. But for the bulk of my 20s, I just didn't picture that for myself. And I had plenty of interactions with doctors that were sort of signaling. I think I asked a few of my doctors, like, well, can I have a baby? And the line that I got over and over again was like, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, which was basically like, we don't want to talk about that. So I guess I absorbed that as like a probably shouldn't kind of thing. And then I found my partner that I'm with now in my late 20s, early 30s. And the first time we started thinking about it was I just had like a nurse practitioner ask me if I wanted to. And I was like, oh, is that a real, can we think about that for real? I didn't know that was a real question. Okay, let's think about that. And we started the ball rolling from there of just like talking to other doctors and figuring out for real, okay, we're going to cross this bridge when we get to it. And maybe this is now. So let's figure out. So Yeah, I think it's rare. I mean, Sophie, the image that you described of seeing this picture of disability in parenthood, I think is kind of rare for a lot of us. And especially in medical spaces, the signals that we often get are like, no, 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 probably shouldn't, let's not, no. So it can be sort of like piecing it together on your own for a lot of us, I think. I definitely had never seen a parent use a wheelchair until Instagram. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, there's so much in there, but what I'm getting from both of you is sort of this almost telling no, or this telling of like, well, it's not the greatest idea, it's not the best idea. And I think being told that by medical professionals is it solidifies
Mm,
this idea that you shouldn't do it, because I think society is one thing which we absolutely need to talk about. And, the messages that society tells disabled women in terms of motherhood, or rather, that if it doesn't tell that story. But when you hear it from a medical professional being like, this isn't the greatest idea, then you take that with the authority in which most people do take
mm,
medical advice. So I think that that's incredibly important. And Sophie, of course, you and I are UK based, so we have the NHS, National Health Service, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about the conversations that you had with doctors, sort of in the you deciding that this is what you wanted for yourself, if you're comfortable.
Yeah, I think I decided it was going to happen, so it was kind of like, right, let's get on with it, kind of thing, literally.
mm.
Yeah, then I actually got pregnant before I'd even then talked to anyone, and I just went to my GP and went, so I'm pregnant, and they were like, oh, okay, right, well, okay, and they had literally no
Yeah.
idea what to do.
Mm,
Um, Eventually,
wow.
obviously, got referred to like the hospital and everything under their care. Um, the midwife at my GP on our very first appointment literally walked into the room and said, I've never had anyone in a wheelchair before, so we're going to do this together. And I was like, well, I've never given birth before, so I have
Yeah.
no idea what I'm
Oh,
doing. I'm
wow.
supposed to be the professional. So it wasn't the greatest start, and we had issues with the actual hospital where I was going to give birth. Like they never referred me to higher up people. And then it went quite far down the line. I think I was about 20 weeks. And they were like, have you got a birth plan? And said, well, no, no one's discussed anything with me. And
Wow.
you really need to sort that out. And then they referred me to somebody else from another hospital, and it only then sort of the ball rolled from there. But it like nobody knew what to do, nobody knew who to talk
Mm,
to. It was just crazy. I mean, we're so grateful for the NHS, like it's
Yeah.
amazing to have, but it's just the lack of information, the lack of knowledge that
mhm.
even the medical professionals don't have. They don't have any
Wow.
training hardly at all, and then like trying to get like the operation booked in and hoists because I have to be
Mm.
hoisted. That was a whole nother thing because they like I had to have hoist for my appointments for the scans and everything, and we had to arrange then for someone to bring it up every time I had an appointment. And yeah, it's just a battle. Everything is always a battle, and you get to the point where you think, oh, why can't it just be simple, just something in life?
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
but we do it, don't we? Because we have no other choice. So.
Mhm.
I mean, for people who might not be aware of this, or who find it as mind-boggling, as I think Sophie and I do, that there are not hoists in every doctor's office or even in a major hospital. There could be no hoist. So for those people like you and I, Sophie, who can't self-transfer, it's a palaver and a half to
Mhm.
organize that and arrange it. And there's so much that prevents disabled women, or,
Mhm.
those who are needing various health screenings, and things like that. It's something that I've been very passionate about for a while. But I think, it's your first pregnancy. You don't know what to expect. And like you said, you expect that knowledge and that guidance to be there from midwives. I mean, this is totally from my perspective, but you watch Call the Midwife, and these women, they know what to do, and
Mhm.
they put the mothers at ease. But for you, that didn't happen.
No.
So I wish I was more surprised, but I feel so sad that that was your experience and that it was really, left largely to you or, this joint effort to figure it out. Rebecca, what about in the States? How was
Mhm.
it in terms of, deciding that this is what you want and then the conversation to doctors?
I have felt lucky for a long time. Sophie, listening to your story makes me feel like even luckier. I can't imagine the feeling of like, wait, where's the expert in the room? Like where's the person who knows what to do? That sounds really scary to me and frustrating. Like, how do we not have more people? It's almost like you're like forging the road yourself. Like you're out there in the jungle, like chopping things down for the people who
I
come
feel like you're
after
the
you.
only disabled mother in the whole
Yes.
world. Like, oh.
Yes, yes. Like you got to lead this whole thing. Wow, that sounds really overwhelming at a time that is going to be overwhelming and scary anyways. So some of the things that made me really lucky in my experience, and I have heard from so many women talking about birth experiences with disabilities. I've heard so many horror stories. So again, I just want to emphasize lots of stars aligned and privileges that were in place that worked well for me. I had good health insurance at the time. I was a teacher, and so I had the benefit of that health insurance, which I relied on very heavily through my pregnancy. Before I got pregnant, they had me meet with a high risk pregnancy clinic at like a big hospital pretty close to me in the middle of Kansas City. And interestingly enough, they were much more interested in. I have a chronic hereditary kidney disease that has nothing to do with my paralysis or wheelchair. I inherited it from my mom, and they were much more interested in that than anything else. They wanted to talk about like, did I want to do genetic testing around that? And there were a lot of things about like blood pressure and concerns about preeclampsia. So the high risk clinic sort of talked me through risks and even birth plans at that point before I was even pregnant. Like, these are some of the options that you might have. And then we were assigned to an OBGYN in the high risk clinic, and she had delivered babies for women with paralysis before. And so I just know how comforting she was to me through the whole experience. And I just want to say, I am very aware of how rare this kind of doctor is. But I also just want to point out that there was like never a hint of a suggestion that was like, why are you doing this? What makes you think you can be a parent? She was entirely empowering, equipped with information, but really gave me options and choices through the whole thing. She was like that North Star guide that, Sophie, I wish so much that you had had. And I hope for everyone who goes through this, because she just like held my hand through the whole thing. She looked after me. She knew what to look for. And again, if I had not had health insurance, I don't know what this experience would have been like, or even just like bad health insurance, which we're on now. I think it would have been quite different, which really terrifies me for the future, for other folks who are going to be moving through this experience here in the States. So yeah, I was like profoundly lucky in a lot of ways through my medical experience of the pregnancy. Yeah.
I mean, which is wonderful, but I think it's so frustrating from,
Mm-hmm.
a another, like rare condition point of view because,
Mm-hmm.
the amount of doctors that I think, Sophie, you and I will interact with who have never heard of
Mm-hmm.
spinal muscular atrophy. And,
Mm-hmm.
we're used to having to take the lead in those conversations and like you said, do that educating. But I mean, when it comes to having a baby, it's bonkers to me how it all works, like let alone, not having a doctor or a medical professional who, is confident that they know what to do and can support you through, the incredible process that your body is about to go through. And, like Sophie, you mentioned about like the physical toll that that takes, when you're a wheelchair user. But I mean, for non-disabled women, it can be horrific and it can be incredibly, difficult on the body. And it makes complete sense. But I mean, I'm so glad that you had that
Mm-hmm.
experience, Rebecca. But I think it's so important that they are able to find you perhaps
Yeah.
a consultant who may not be at your local hospital, but like someone somewhere will have delivered a baby to a woman with SMA before. So like not
Mhm.
linking you up with that is really frustrating. I want to talk about, family and friends before we get into like society because, we've talked about like the very few examples that we saw as, as young women. But did you have any surprising interactions with friends and family, either when you decided that this was something that you wanted for your life or when it, came to, hey everyone, I'm expecting a baby. Was there anything that surprised you in the way that people in your life reacted?
Yeah, to be honest, I had really positive experiences. I think all of my friends and family were literally over the moon that I was pregnant.
Hmm.
And none of them really expressed any concerns. I think they know me and they know that I will get through it, even if I have to fight all the way, I'll do it.
Hmm.
So yeah, they were just really supportive, which was lovely. And they've been amazing since, like with helping with Zyra and yeah, our daily life. So no, I had really good experiences.
Oh, I mean, that's exactly what it should be. But yeah, Rebecca.
Yeah, I will say, and I know she wishes she could redo this moment, but my mom was very scared when she found out I was pregnant. There are those moments that you will never forget, and telling your mom that you're going to have a baby is one of them. And I had watched her be over the moon for 25 grandkids that came before my son.
Oh
Um,
my God.
I know it's bonkers, it's bananas, it's just silly. The Tossics have a lot of babies, right? I told you I grew up in the world of motherhood. My mom was worried. She said something like, "How are you going to do this?" Um, and we've had many other conversations since then, and ways that she has been supportive since then. But in that moment, she was taken off guard. She didn't know it was coming, and that was what came out of her mouth. And so that has definitely stuck with me. I think for me, the things that have been a little bit more surprising or harder actually came after my son was born. And some of these, not comments, but just sort of the ways that people interact with us. Those were the moments that felt rougher for me in terms of family and friends and around this new role that I occupy. And yeah, and my mom in that moment, that was definitely kind of a can't take it back kind of moment
Yeah.
for us. Yeah.
Yeah. In a way, like, I mean, that's so devastating to hear when you're delivering this news that you're really excited about. But, like it is when you
Yeah.
already have health complications and health concerns, like it makes sense, but it's not the
Yeah.
right time, I suppose, to have that
Yeah.
conversation. But I do want to talk about having children. I mean, what was it like, in terms of now you have a kid and having to work around the limitations that your own body has? How did it feel? How did you navigate those like beginning stages of trying to figure out what you could do for your child, what you weren't able to do?
Mhm.
Sophie, don't know if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, I really struggled actually. I think like you don't know what to expect anyway. And then like I tried to breastfeed. I actually did breastfeeding for about 4.5 months, and it was honestly the hardest thing I've ever done. But it was something that I could do for her, so I just wanted to do it because it was. And even like Rebecca, you saying about your mum, my mum said that to me when I was
Mm.
crying, when I was like, I can't do this. She was like, you can do this for her. And
Oh.
it kind of was like, okay, you've made me feel guilty, like I need to do this, but it was also
Mm.
like that's reality. It is the one
Mm.
thing that I can do for her because I couldn't have the strength to really pick her up. I had living carers from sort of the days I was born, and obviously my husband was around. So they helped me lift her. I obviously couldn't get on the floor with her, which I really struggled with. It's obviously got better as she's got older. But those first couple of years where she's always on the floor and always like wanting to be picked up and cuddled. I couldn't do that for her. They could obviously pass her to me and I could hold her on my lap, but lack of being able to do it physically was so tough. And I think that was the hardest part of motherhood for me completely. Everyone always says to you, but you're still her mum, like you're doing it in your own way. And you're like, I know that. And it's, you're never not going to give her that love. And she's always going to know that love. But from a personal point of view, it hurts that you can't do it. But you just have to get through it. You get through it in your own way. And she wouldn't know any different. So that's the one blessing, I suppose.
I think, you know, when you said about this is the one thing I can do for her, like my instinct was to say to her, like, no, 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 like there's so much else that I'm sure you did then and that you will still be doing for her, but I don't want to, you know, negate or, you know, say that your experience wasn't how that felt and imagining how difficult that is. I mean, did you and Rebecca as well with those early days? But I'm wondering, was there any support in terms of like other disabled people? I mean, I know that, you know, it was 2020, so social media, but was there anything that you saw or were able to connect with like other disabled people over how do I do this or do you feel this way?
Yeah, I have to say, Sophie, hearing you describe those early days for you is incredibly cathartic for me. I was not prepared for how that would throw me so hard. And I'm listening to you, and the things I hear you talking about in this conversation make me think that you are like a very positive, like we're gonna get through this, we're gonna like figure out how to make this work kind of person. And to hear you talk about that being really hard for you makes me feel seen and like not alone. So thank you for sharing that. I had a very hard time. I had a very hard time and I didn't expect to, you know, like I had just written this book that was like ableism this and it, you know, like I'm pointing out all the things, you know, and I understand my experience of disability in the world and I actually felt really empowered through pregnancy. I felt really good about what we were doing. And then almost as soon as he was born, there were these things that I wanted very much to be able to do as a parent that I could not do. And I mean, I've been disabled almost my entire life, as long as I remember. And I don't think that I had ever felt that way before, really. It wasn't like there were these things that I was like, oh, I need to be able to do this thing that I can't do. Like I had never really felt that way. It wasn't like I was like desperate to rock climb or something. And, you know, we could have found a way to make that work too, I'm sure. But like I had never felt that way before. And I felt so incompetent, incapable, like so mad at my body. I felt all of these things that I wasn't prepared to feel. I remember people telling me when I was pregnant that like he would be used to that like movement of moving through the world from my wheelchair and that would be the thing that would comfort him. That would be like the sensation that would comfort him when he was born. And it wasn't true at all. Like all he wanted when he was born was for his dad to carry him and bounce him and pace around the house. That's all he wanted. And he cried a lot as a baby. And that was like the one thing that could soothe him. And I couldn't do it. And yes, then there's that whole stage where like he's on the ground all the time and like there's just this whole window and it's the beginning window
Yeah.
when it's like your introduction to this role when so much of their experience requires like mobility things. And so I would say for the first year of my kid's life, my internalized ableism was off the charts, like didn't even know how to talk about it, full of like shame and feeling like I don't know why I thought I could do this kind of stuff. And as much as I could talk about it, I feel like it would have been very beneficial to be able to share that with other parents. Like Sophie, I cannot even imagine if we had processed that together in real time, what that would have felt like. I think that would have made a huge difference. I did have, there's a disabled wheelchair using parent on Instagram, Alex Wegman, that FaceTimed with me a few times and talked with me about like really practical stuff and strategies and made me feel really seen through that. I don't think I shared as much with her as maybe it would have been good and healthy for me too, but I was so ashamed. I felt so much like if I say these things out loud, it is somehow going to confirm that I'm not a good or real mom. And so I have to just like power through it and not say it out loud. And that was, of course, in the long term, like more harmful. than anything. I do think there are a lot more like support groups now than there were even in 2020. I don't know, Sophie, if you've seen or any of those kind of popping up online, but I've heard more about them
Yeah.
on Instagram and Facebook. Yeah, are there any that have stood out to you? It's kind of a blur to me. I've never been a part of one, but I'm excited that they exist.
Yeah, there is a there's a Facebook one for SM mothers that have got SMA. So I joined that quite early on, which was really good.
Awesome.
And like they were so open for any questions or anything, so that was quite nice. And I also did have a few friends through Instagram as well that I'd known be parents before me, so they had like experience and they'd gone through it. And I was quite close with them, sort of like we knew each other in person, but a lot more online. And it was so lovely being able to reach out to them because I think like Rebecca, you kind of want to hold it in, you don't want to admit it. But I think I was
Mm,
just so at that point where I was like, I need to talk to somebody and see if this is just me or is it.
yeah.
And they were so helpful.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question, real quick? Sophie, I'm curious because one thing I want to underscore as we're talking about this is that it has shifted pretty profoundly. Like, as my son has grown, I have realized, like, oh, that was like the tiniest moment of parenthood. And so much of it is what comes after. And already at 4.5, it feels like his need for my mobility is like shrinking to almost non-existent now. I'm curious about how you felt that shift and like if there was a specific age or time when you felt like, oh, we've crossed some sort of threshold, if it felt that way.
Definitely. I think, yeah, I'd say like probably between like 3 and 4. And she's like, Zara's very independent. I don't know
Hmm.
whether that's just because I'm her mum and I can do less for her, but like getting dressed and shoes on, like she's done that from quite an early age. And I think I just tried to encourage her to do it because I knew in a horrible way it would help me out. But obviously
I don't
it's,
think that's horrible. I don't think
no,
that's horrible. I
why do we think it's horrible?
don't know, but yes, I'm with you.
Yeah, so that's really helped. Obviously, her getting more independent and being able to do it is so much easier now she's older. I mean, I still need carers, sort of like just helping her get her in the out of the car and things like that. Those kind of physical
Mm-hmm.
things I still need help with, but in general, it's much easier, and I feel more like her mum than
Yeah,
I ever did because I couldn't when they can't talk and when they can't
yeah.
all your physicalness is being the mum. Whereas
Mhm.
now we have conversations and we can talk. It's so much more, I feel so much more like her mum now. And we have that
Mm.
much more close relationship. So that's lovely.
Oh, I love that. I feel similarly. Yeah, it's been a similar arc for me. I feel like language was a big piece of that for me too. Yeah.
And I think that makes so much sense because, your kids will grow up not having the frame of reference that we do for, what the roles of a mom
Mm.
and a dad and a whoever look like because
Hmm.
this is their normal. And I think that that's so important because, they have just grown up knowing what mom can and can't do. And then either, knowing that you go to someone else for some things, you go to her for other things, but they know and they figure it out along with you. But I also really want to ask you guys about like not just in those early couple of years, but even now, like Sophie, you were saying, like you still need carers and things like help get her in and out of the car and stuff. And one thing that I've seen far too much of when I look at, disabled women who are pregnant online is, comments about like how it's, and this is not coming from me, but, from what I've seen, like, unfair, the dad or the
Mm.
carer, the partner has to do everything and, sort of like either downgrading your role, upgrading theirs. And I do think that societal like gender roles plays a big part of that because we're surprised that men do normal like child rearing things,
Hmm.
and that's so shitty that we have that expectation or that even frame of reference in 2024. But how did that feel as a disabled woman that your partners did have to do more? Like how did
Hmm.
that feel? How was that perceived? Rebecca, I don't know if you want to talk about how that
Yeah.
was for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, this part of the conversation like really pisses me off. I get so frustrated. I get so mad at the sort of just the like persistent, lasting, narrow expectations we have of mothers and what this looks like and what this should be. I mean, it's almost as if we still think that these mothers are like living on the prairie and like it's just them and their baby's dependent on them and only them for their survival, and there aren't even like refrigeraters in this world. I don't know, it's just
Yeah,
like
they're churning butter while the husband's
yes,
out like slaving wheat or
yes,
something.
exactly. It's just like so it's so frustrating to me because I think that that picture is placed on disabled mothers even more, because like in the world that we live in, how many mothers are working and have their kids taken care of from a very early age in a daycare
Yeah,
or with a nanny, or there are like women who have night nurses. There's so many ways that we can create networks of care, and that all kinds of people and members of the family and fathers can be a part of that network of care. And isn't that like a great thing? Like, don't we want there to be all kinds of parts of this net to catch a
yeah.
child?
There's that expression, it takes a village. Like, so it
Right.
is expected multiple people.
Yeah. So I guess it feels like this expectation that we put onto motherhood is so punishing to all of us, to all the mothers, disabled and not, to fathers, to like, and to our children. This expectation is really punishing. So I think what feels really meaty and exciting to me about disability motherhood in particular is just like pushing against that narrative as hard as we can to say like that is not what the job is, that is not what the job should be. I think that creating a whole network like Sophie, you organizing the care to join you in the care of your child is a huge part of the job that you do as a parent, and I think we all do that in different ways, or we should be able to do that in different ways. We should be supported in that act. I think that that is sustainable and that is healthy and that is hearty. So yeah, you can hear my like raging voice about this. I just like it's so frustrating to me, those comments. And also one more thing before I end my little rant. There's also this expectation, like I heard this a little bit in your voice, Sophie, and I recognize it because I hear it in my own voice, about like somehow it's like an unfortunate thing that your kid is building this independence, or that like it might make your life a little bit easier if she's independent. I mean, there are like whole parenting philosophies about empowering our kids to be independent. Like Montessori schools are all about empowering your child to be a member of the family, participating in the upkeep and support of the household. And I find it really hypocritical and frustrating to say, like, well, that's really good unless you're a disabled parent. And then suddenly it's turned into a bad thing. Like this
Mm.
is a thing we can offer our kids. And I understand that that can get muddled and messy when it's like kids that are given responsibilities that are too much for them. But like learning to put your shoes on is a great skill for your kid to learn as early as she can. So yeah, sorry, I'll end my rant there. But great question, Emma.
Yeah, no, I think that what you said is something I do want to come back to. I think Sophie, this is particularly relevant for you. But as you were talking, Rebecca, I thought, yeah, unfortunately, we do as a society tend to judge working moms who, will hire people, but that's because it's a choice, if that makes sense. Like she is prioritizing not over her baby, but she is still prioritizing other areas of her life as opposed to deprioritizing work so that you can put all of your priority into raising your child. But as a disabled mom, you don't have a choice about needing that extra support because it's not, like you were saying, Sophie, like it's not like that you don't want to be like on the floor and playing with her and stuff. It's like you can't do that. But I'm wondering then, like Sophie, how that feels for you and the comments that, maybe you've seen or heard either to yourself or to other disabled women about the role that other people play in the child raising process.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really lucky that a lot of my carers are my family members. So, like, my mum is my carer, my sister. So, actually, my daughter's surrounded by her family, which is such a
Mm.
lovely thing. Like they see her all the
Mhm.
time, they're growing up with her. So in that aspect, it's lovely. But I have seen so much negativity on certain people's Instagrams and things. Like, how can you bring up a child when you can't do it? You're not a worthwhile mother, and all these things. And you just think it doesn't just take a physical ability to be a mother. That doesn't make you a mother just because you can walk. Like that's
Mhm.
just crazy.
Mhm.
The love you can give your child is so much more than some parents might give their children that are able. And you
Mhm.
think that I can give her so much from me, and it shouldn't matter that my physical ability isn't as strong as others. I've had a few times where I've been out when Zyra was a bit younger and in a buggy, and maybe my sister was pushing the buggy, and they've just addressed her as her mother. And I've had
Mhm.
that probably 3 or 4 times.
Mhm.
And my sister just turned to me straight away and said, "Oh, well, do you want to ask her mum?" And like make a point of it. And they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay, yeah," because they just don't expect it. It's just so unexpected.
Mm.
And I quite like it because I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I'm her mum." So yeah, but it's just one of those things that you just think, oh, it's just you just put up
Yeah.
with it. It's just like crazy. But yeah, I think it's society is just their view of disabled mothers and disabled parents in general is just rubbish, really rubbish. And there's just
Mhm.
not enough out there showing disabled parents, even on like media and on TV, just
Yeah.
making it normal, just making it recognized that we are here. It's just not there.
Mm.
Yeah, and to be honest, that was a huge motivation for wanting to do this episode because, I told you guys my frame of reference, for the first very, very long time in my life because I didn't start identifying as disabled until my early 20s, which is, bonkers to think about, but I didn't have any of like you two, on social media seeing this representation. And I mean, Sophie, when you think about it, like if there was a little girl with SMA now, seeing you, I mean, if it was something I had seen and it wasn't, oh, this thing that's so bizarre that it actually needs to be on the
Mhm.
news, then that would have potentially, I mean, I don't know, this is, something for me and my therapist to go into most definitely, but it's like, I don't know what came first, like this idea from society this is not for
Mm.
you, or me feeling that that's not something I want to do or have for my life. And I think, Rebecca,
Mhm.
you mentioned that a little bit
Mhm.
in your book, and that really hit me because
Mhm.
it was one of those thoughts that I just sort of have floating around, but that I didn't give space to, thinking,
Mhm.
like, well, hang on a minute. Is
Mhm.
me feeling like I don't want children and prioritizing other things in my life because I've been told I can't or
Mhm.
shouldn't do that, and I
Mhm.
just internalized that, or is it that I'm genuinely just not? I would say I'm
Yeah.
not very maternal, but again, guys, if you met my dogs, you'd really feel differently. But it's that chicken and egg kind of situation. To Rebecca, I don't know if there was anything like you wanted to come
Mm.
in there with.
Yeah, it is. It's a funny thing to live in a society and breathe in and out the air that has such narrow scripts for bodies like ours. And I'm finding this more and more is like how much I struggle to decipher what I want. Like it's like it's an underdeveloped muscle somehow. Like so much of the choices that I and the way that I've imagined my life or what I want is it seems to be in relationship with not only what I have been allowed to imagine, but also just like access and what paths feel easy and what paths feel hard. So I don't know that I have too much more insight other than to just name the feeling and the experience of that. Um, I don't know. I still don't know. I mean, like, I don't know, Sophie, if you guys are in this conversation, and I don't want you to put anything on the spot for you, but like, we're thinking of like, do we want to have a second baby or not? And similarly, I'm like, how do I even know what I want? I don't even still. How do I decipher? And how do I put that in relationship with reality and what is possible given the world we live in, the healthcare we have, the body that I have, and all of that. So it seems like a constant negotiation and a processing. But I don't know, Sophie, if you have any experience with that feeling or.
I mean, it's funny because I literally said to my mum earlier, I said, there's no way I could ever have another baby because I'm so tired all the time now.
Mm,
I think, like, obviously, the cold in the UK at the minute is awful and it really affects my muscles. And having Zyra actually made me weaker,
mm,
which is one of the things they did warn me about. They said this could
mhm,
happen, and it did. And I literally, yeah, I said earlier, I was like, I wouldn't be able to do it because
mm,
I physically wouldn't have the energy to
mm,
do it again, like go through
mhm,
childbirth and pregnancy and
mhm, mhm,
having those early years. Like I just physically couldn't do it. So
mhm.
yeah, we are one and done.
Yeah, which is beautiful too. I mean, and it's interesting the way you describe it as sort of like what you desire isn't even part of it's what is literally possible and working within that framework. And I think that makes a lot of sense. We might be joining you in that one and done also. It's a funny thing to negotiate, and it seems like for a lot of non-disabled people, the relationship between what you want and what you do is different than maybe some of the ways that
Yeah.
we make choices.
I
Yeah.
think that's incredibly true. I think it's what, the limitations that are put in place on us by society and then
Mhm,
by like physical infrastructure
mhm,
opportunity, but then
mhm,
also, what, and I think, all women will feel this way, like, societal pressures, societal expectations. But I think you're absolutely right that, disabled people, and it's again something that I talk about with my therapist a lot, is like it's all about choice. And there are
mhm,
choices that we don't have
mhm,
that other
mhm.
people have. And I
Yeah.
think like Sophie, I hugely admire you for, the sort of like go get 'em and, like enjoy pushing back kind of thing. And I think that
Mhm,
that's incredible. But my God, I can just also feel how that is emotionally for you because it's exhausting and
mm,
it's really hard to
mm,
always be in that fighting
mhm.
mode. And it's hard. It's really hard.
I know you just wish like life was just simple, like just
Yeah.
general access of life and just getting through every day. You just think, "Oh, I just wish this was so easy." But you fight every day, and it's just, I think being disabled literally comes with this thing that you just have to push for everything. There's nothing that comes easy, and you just have to fight for it, which it shouldn't be. And we shouldn't
Mm,
be okay with it, I suppose. But
mm,
like you're just one person, like you can only do what you can do. And I think that's why I find social media so good, is the fact that there's so many voices on there and so many
mm,
disabled voices, and I think that's so powerful. And I
mm.
feel like little by little we're being heard a bit more and reaching out to people that would probably never have conversations with disabled people and never
Yeah.
have those people in their lives. I get messages a lot and they're like, I've learned so much from you. And even though we shouldn't have to teach people, unless we do, I don't see how it will ever change because able-bodied and non-disabled people just sometimes just don't get it. They just don't
Mm,
understand what we have to go through on a daily basis.
mhm,
And unless we talk about it, they never will. So
mhm,
What's interesting is that not only do you both use your platforms for education, awareness raising, and all of that, but I wonder, with your kids, they're going to grow up with lived experience of disability. So they are what I'm presuming, and well, please correct if I'm wrong, two non-disabled children who will be so comfortable with disability. It will be absolutely normal because it's literally their mom, right? Their mom is disabled, their home life has disability in it. So I always think about it, when I went to the same school from age 5 till 14. And, I always think for those students that I grew up with, they will go out into the world and then treat disabled
mm,
people differently than if they hadn't gone to school with me because it became normalized for them very, very early. And that's what your kids will probably be doing is, when they are adults in, whatever area of life that they want to go into and they come across a disabled person that, they will have an incredibly different lens on that person than a non-disabled colleague or partner or friend or whoever it is. And that's also incredibly valuable. But I want to ask you guys, what is something that you think that as a disabled mom that you can give your child that non-disabled moms can't? Because I think we've talked a lot about, the limitations and what you can't physically sometimes do for your child. But what is something that you guys think no one else is going to be able to offer this to my kid? And that's something that I'm really happy about, I'm really proud of, or I'm excited to see it. I'm aware that that's a huge question, but I really just wanted to wrap us on a note of like, okay, what is so fucking amazing about disabled moms?
I love this question so much. Yes, I love it. I mean, I don't know where to start, but I just want to note that I love it. Sophie, do you have anything that it's like bursting out that you want to share first?
The first word that came to my head was empathy. It like a bit like you were saying, Emma, before, like she will have a totally different view of disabled people than any of her other classmates, any other people that she knows, because she sees disability and it's totally normal for her. And I just think that's amazing. I hope that in the future she'll be able to share that with her friends and share that, and they will see it as totally acceptable, totally not different. And she's just Cyrus' mum. Like that's all I hope for. And I hope that they don't penalize her for it, but I'm just so glad that she's got the empathy and the care and the open-mindedness that other children might not have. And I think that's one great thing of being a disabled mum that others can't offer.
If
That's
any
cool.
kid does penalize her for it, I will run them over. I have no problem running over a child.
We'll
I'm
all be there.
saying it right here, right now. No problem running over a shitty kid.
It's the
Okay.
best. I think I don't know if this answers your question directly, but I have thought a lot about the ways that disability shapes me as a parent, and kind of almost, I know people get itchy around the word like disability defines me. I very much feel like disability defines me, and I feel like it defines me as a parent in ways that I really relish. So one of the ways that I think it shapes me as a parent is in my priorities to move slow through the world and stay connected as we move through the world together. I have been in collaboration with my son since as long as he could communicate with me. And a lot of that was in those early days, Sophie, like we talked about, like his mobility being more dependent on me. And so we had to be in very much collaboration together as we did anything. Getting in and out of the car seat has always been a big one for us. Is like me kind of trying to take cues from him for what he's ready to be able to do on his own, and then communicating back and forth with how we're going to move through the world together. So I think that I relish the ways that my disability has held me to my ideals as a parent, and my ideals is that we would stay present together, stay connected, and move through the world slowly. We are always the last people out of school, out of the parking lot. We like stop to look at every book on the shelf and every plant on the ground and all the ants crawling on the sidewalk, because I have to collaborate with him to go anywhere. I like it's much harder for me to physically force him to do anything. So we are like moving through the world together. And I relish the way that disability keeps me committed to that way of being a parent, that we move slowly together, we stay present and connected in the world together. And I hope that that is something that is sort of like built into our relationship now, that we can continue to cultivate, even when that's not as necessary or mandated to doing school pickup, that's something I think that has really shaped our relationship in a positive way.
Because I mean, communication in whatever form is so incredibly important. Like, I always say to my care team, like, if we can't openly and effectively communicate, then this is never going to work. Because we, as disabled people, we have to articulate exactly what we need or what we want when we need or want it. And, it is about collaborating and it is about communication. So I think that that's such an important thing to have with a parent, because then as he grows up and he starts having like, different questions about
Exactly.
like life and, what is this? What is that? You'll have that foundation of, well, I talk to her about everything because we have to, but like then it's easier to do that.
That's my hope. We'll talk again in 5 years and see how it's going, but that's my
Yeah,
hope
that
for
would
it.
be good. We did it.
Wouldn't that be fun? We should totally do that.
Oh, but I want to just say an incredibly huge thank you to both of you for coming on the podcast and being so open and honest and sharing what I can only imagine are some really difficult moments and experiences, but then hopefully some nice ones as well. Thank you both so, so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Wheelchair Activist. If you want to stay up to date and catch all of our previous episodes, you can find them all on my website, thewheelchairactivist.com. You can also follow me on social media at emma.vogelman on most platforms. And if you'd like to support the podcast, our links to the GoFundMe and Buy Me a Coffee are in this episode description.